Check it out, Startup Nation. I know many of you are trying to improve your marketing performance, right? You have your business or your e-commerce store and you're trying to increase that brand awareness. No worries, I got you. You should listen to the brand new Keep Optimizing podcast. That's optimizing with an S and not a Z. It's a marketing podcast that will provide you with not only the latest tips and advice in the game, but also you will hear from experts in their field when it comes to email marketing, SEO, and more. This is a must-listen-to podcast for my e-commerce entrepreneurs. It's hosted by Chloe Thomas, who is a 15-year marketing expert, best-selling author, and award-winning podcast host. It's already a top 20 marketing podcast in 7 countries. So clearly, you're going to get amazing value every episode. So as you can see, Startup Nation, you're in good hands with my girl CT. So listen and subscribe to the Keep Optimizing podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you like to get your favorite podcast. You can also get more information at keepoptimizing.com. The link is there in the show notes.
It's time to be about that life, the startup life. Here's your host, Dominic Lawson.
All right, Startup Nation, so I hope you're ready to receive some value today. My name is Dominic Lawson, and this is The Startup Life, the show for entrepreneurs and career-minded professionals. You know, Startup Nation, as you go forth on your path to entrepreneurship, you're always trying to think about innovative ways to scale, innovative ways to create products. And our guest today knows very much about that journey and about that path. She is an advisor, educator, and contributor to Entrepreneur Magazine. She's an adjunct lecturer at NYU and a board member at Startup AZ Foundation. She is also the CEO of Coplex, a corporate startup studio that partners with existing corporations to build high-growth tech companies in highly regulated industries. She is the one and only Brenda Schmidt. Miss B, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am all right. You know what? Let's just kind of hop right into it. If you would, ma'am, just kind of share your origin story of a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I had probably an unusual path into entrepreneurship. I got science degrees. My undergrad was in microbiology. Then I got a master's in immunology. And I worked for Baxter Healthcare for about 15 years. And honestly, working for a large organization before going out and being an entrepreneur was a helpful experience around just quality and process. But back in 2005, I just realized I wanted to go out and I had always been an entrepreneur. I was a hand raiser. And
Gotcha.
So, if they wanted somebody to do something, I was raising my hand, and it provided me with the opportunity to just dabble in a lot of different things while I was at Baxter. But they were in the process of laying 5,000 people off. And I raised my hand and I said, please lay me off, because I had 18 months of severance. And at the time, I didn't know anything about institutional capital. I sort of had this forced discipline around, gosh, if I'm going to go out and be an entrepreneur, I better, get to profitability in 18 months, or I need to go find a job. So started my first company in 2005 and bootstrapped that organization. And then, had a variety of experiences in that business and came up with an idea that I just really felt had market traction. So went out and I bought the book, Venture Capital for Dummies, because that was really helpful, and raised a Series A with frankly the first venture capital firm that I spoke with. So then once you get entrepreneurship in your blood, it's hard to do anything else. And I've been a serial entrepreneur ever since.
I hear that. I love that concept you talked about earlier about being a hand raiser. Kind of talk about that, because I think oftentimes we get on the path of entrepreneurship or just any platform that we find ourselves on, and we're afraid to ask questions. Kind of talk about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think one of the hallmarks of being a great entrepreneur is almost this insatiable curiosity and wanting to learn new things. And so, whether you're an entrepreneur doing that in your own business or whether you work for a large company, there's a huge opportunity to be an entrepreneur and create new, it might not be the next greatest high growth tech company, but there's certainly opportunities to do things differently and more innovatively within existing organizations, whether that's improvement to process or product. But, if somebody somebody said, hey, I remember the time someone said, I want someone to lead our total quality management program. And this was, way back a long time ago. And I'm like, I'll do that. I didn't know anything about total quality management, but neither did anybody else, so it gave me the opportunity to level up in that area. And then when my division was going global, I said, hey, I really like to have Latin America. And they sent me to language school. And so I think, just that opportunity to just continue to be curious and learn new things is I think something that also has benefited me in becoming an entrepreneur, because every day, you're the chief everything officer, and every day you have challenges that you don't know. And you have to either seek out help or learn about to make you successful.
Absolutely. And that's why I love this life, and I love talking to people like you, Brenda, because you really do have like this blank slate, and then you kind of create what that path looks like. We always talk about the path and the journey of entrepreneurship, but I guess the irony of it is that you get to create what that looks like. You know what I mean? So I'm just always fascinated to hear that. Thank you for sharing that.
No, that's exactly right. In fact, when I teach college, I said, I used to teach undergrad for about 4 years, and I said, it doesn't really matter, get a degree and learn how to be a learner and be a lifelong learner. But what you graduate in today is probably not highly likely to be what you're going to be doing 20 or 30 years from now. So don't stress about it, just don't, just get out there and figure it out. And I think the key too is just really following your passion, and those passions can change over your lifetime depending on those experiences, because so many entrepreneurs have a story around, a particular problem or event in their life that motivated them to start whatever business that is. And those are episodic over your lifetime that can definitely change the course and direction of that path. So I definitely, completely agree with that perspective.
Right, for sure. And I love, what you said about, going to college and kind of become that experienced learner, that insatiable learner, if you will. And I want to mention Startup Nation that, Brenda, has a BS in microbiology at the Indiana University, Bloomington, and immunology, the University of Wisconsin, Madison. Some Big Ten clash in there a little bit, but that's neither here nor there.
That's a separate conversation.
Absolutely. But, going back to, those different degree fields and stuff like that, what are some of those things that, that you didn't really expect that you learned in those degree fields that you really didn't expect to use on your path to entrepreneurship, but it have become quite valuable, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think the fact that I got early degrees in science made me a little bit of a data geek. And
okay,
so,
fair enough.
And that is really important as you move forward in entrepreneurship around, if you have an idea, going out and doing that early market validation and thinking about it from the perspective of, okay, what are all the assumptions I'm making about this particular idea that I have? And you may share it with your mom or your best friend and your dog, and they all love your idea, but, have you actually gone out and asked other people? So, I like the idea of ranking, what are all the assumptions I'm making? And then what are those experiments that I can go out and do to validate that those assumptions are valid? And I think that sort of scientific method applied to any new business idea has been helpful, as opposed to having both a qualitative and quantitative approach to how I look at opportunities. I think was rooted in that sort of scientific method through those degrees a long time ago, and also just my entire entrepreneurship journey has been in healthcare and understanding just those concepts early on through those degrees have been helpful.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that. Once again, Startup Nation, we're talking to Brenda Schmidt, the CEO of Coplex. And if you want to check out Coplex, we have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you're listening to the replay on the podcast. And if you're listening to radio, it's Coplex, COPLEX.com. for sure. So, I know you just a matter of a month, you've kind of recently been appointed CEO of Coplex. Kind of talk about that transition and talk about Coplex as a whole, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So the last organization I founded, Solera Health, very, very rapid growth. We raised $72 million in venture capital. But you know what? I think a lot of part of being an entrepreneur is a lot of self-reflection. And what I realize is I'm a builder. I love product market fit, early business design, and I like that 0 to 30, 0 to 50 million growth trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the one that's going to run a business that is, worried about why something costs $1.13 and not $1.10.
Gotcha.
And so, I'm still a very large shareholder in Solera. I'm on the board. I'm executive chairman. But I really pivoted to this time in my career how I can actually do this in a more scalable way. So what Coplex does is takes great ideas and turns them into high growth technology companies. And so when I assumed the CEO role here in April, the company had built this amazing team, an amazing set of assets, but they were really focused in a non-industry, non-specific, let's find a founder and build a business. And I got here, I was like, wow, there's a massive opportunity for this company, but it needs to be pivoted a little bit. So we're now focused on healthcare almost exclusively and insurtech, so that intersection of healthcare and insurance. And we're focused on partnering with large existing companies who have IP and assets and ideas, but because of the innovator's dilemma, they can't effectively commercialize those. So we really take the best unfair advantage of a company. They have ideas, capital, subject matter expertise, and distribution channel, and partner it with the best entrepreneurs and technology and lean methodology to really create businesses at an arm's length. So I'm pointing at venture as a service.
Mm-hmm.
So hire us to build and commercialize these high growth tech companies that, because of misaligned incentives and corporate culture and bureaucracy, are really, really difficult to effectively commercialize within the four walls of his existing large company. So we've quickly gotten quite a bit of traction with large health systems, with pharma, with some insurance companies, because I think we can really help them innovate faster and more effectively than some of the other types of innovation activities they may have been pouring a lot of money into, like R&D and innovation labs and accelerators, which haven't driven large scale disruption in healthcare to any great extent.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to kind of ask a follow up, because you come in as CEO and they've already had some success, right? And you talk about this pivot and exploiting that opportunity that you just talked about. Talk about coming in as the new CEO and kind of selling that proposition to the team, because they've already had success, and you kind of got to get over that barrier of the new person, even though the new person is the CEO. But kind of talk about like that process, if you don't mind.
Well, it was interesting, not being the founder. It was the first time I've been a CEO and not a founder. And
Gotcha.
When you're a founder, you're really walking in as the expert and you're building it de novo.
Right.
This is the first time I walked in, and I had to take much more of a learner approach and not an expert approach. And so the first several months, I just spent a lot of time with the team, and frankly, a lot of time out in the market, understanding what are people doing in corporate innovation, and what are the constraints, and what are the opportunities. And I think bringing the whole team along and socializing the learnings that we were all having in the market, I think it created the vision and excitement around the team for what the opportunity is. And it wasn't me just coming in and saying, hey, this is my idea. I'm gonna go do this. Get in line.
Right.
It was really, having this, really understanding that the team and the opportunity in the market, and being really collaborative in that process, I think really, really helped. But any entrepreneurial leader is really declaring the vision of where the company can go, and getting people really excited about that, and then making everybody comfortable that we can actually execute against that plan. And that's really, and then I'm here for support and making it happen. But, the team here is just phenomenal. And it was one of the reasons I wanted to join, as the corporate culture here is just phenomenal. And that culture trumps strategy
Right.
in so many ways.
Absolutely. Culture definitely trumps strategy. Thank you for sharing that. Were there any road bumps or, anything like that with onboarding new clients or even coming into the CEO role due to COVID? Because it's kind of a weird time right now. So were there any any bumps in the road due to that?
We were expecting higher growth than we had, but
Okay.
Q2 looked like Q1. So our clients were corporate clients who had made capital decisions to fund their innovation activities last year, and while I think we've seen some pullback on spending in that area, I think that the types of clients that partner with Coplex have a strategic imperative and a budget and leadership that at the C-suite that values what we're doing. So we haven't seen that. We've definitely seen an uptick more recently for businesses that people would like to launch and scale,
Gotcha.
next year. So it didn't really impact us that much. I think the biggest challenge was the origins of Coplex actually started as a development and design firm, and a lot of studios have those core capabilities, and then say, okay, what else do we need to wrap around these core capabilities to actually build businesses? So business design and growth hacking and things like that. So the biggest challenge I've had is getting out of a time and materials mentality and more in a value mentality. So when I walked in, I said, everything here needs another zero.
Gotcha.
So that's the biggest, is that is really having people value that they bring because of the knowledge and the skill set that they have outside of an hourly rate. And so I think that's where I think the business has such a big opportunity, because corporate clients understand the value that we're bringing much beyond an hourly rate that you may pay to build something,
Gotcha.
to build a product or something.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And kind of sticking with, your clients and they come on board. What are some of those biggest, some of those biggest hurdles that you have to get those clients to see? Is it, scaling too fast? Is it something else? Kind of share that dynamic between what you guys do with your clients in that regard when they first kind of on board to what you do.
Yeah. My biggest surprise in partnering with large corporations is I thought they would come to the table with a lot more in-depth market knowledge. And I was incredibly surprised that they didn't, that they were really coming in with an idea that looked very much like any other entrepreneur founder coming in with an idea, but they really hadn't done a lot of work or market validation of that idea.
Gotcha.
I think the hardest part about that was hard for us is honestly how much sort of management and strategic consulting that we would do outside of just building businesses. So that caused us to need to rethink our payment and business model and structure a little bit. But the other piece was the worst client we have is when somebody comes in and says, I want you to build this, and takes a product first approach. And what we've learned is that a product first approach rarely can meet its potential for market commercialization, that you got to back up and convince them, hey, we need to take 3 or 4 months and do a lot of market validation and business design, whether that's wireframes or high fidelity mockups, before we ever write a line of code. Like, people want to sort of rush in and build technology. And I think that's been kind of this, look, if we can lean into 4 or 5 months of product market fit and unit economics and, go to market strategy, when we finally launch this thing, it typically takes us 9 to 12 months to launch a business. It is going to rapidly scale, and we know we're going to have product market fit. I think a lot of organizations have this technology or a product, and then they're out looking for a problem. And I think convincing them to back up and really lean into the early phases. And now we're proving that out. And I think that's an area where we can really add value, because we see a lot of organizations, especially large organizations, taking much more of this product first approach.
For sure. And I bet that can be tough. You created this thing and you're just ready to kind of go. And then somebody just comes along and says, maybe we need to kind of pump the brakes or kind of back up a little bit. So I just imagine that's probably a tough conversation.
Well, I think when you say, that's part of the process when we're mapping all of this out,
Fair enough.
Who's your client and your customer, and then we're saying, what are the assumptions that you're making? They're realizing okay, why do you believe this? And then I think they're quickly realizing that they are making assumptions that aren't validated, and they're valuing the opportunity for us to go out there and truly do external, qualitative and quantitative validation. So I think that exercise opens their eyes a lot, because they're realizing, gosh, I am making these assumptions, and I don't have facts to support them. So, and then once you do it once, then the process just becomes easier, because we very much take a portfolio approach with our clients. You give us, let's figure out all the IP assets and ideas across the company. We'll prioritize them against your fixed and variable criteria, and find those that, have merit, and let us go out and validate those in the market, and then provide suggestions back to you for what to do with those. So some may actually end up in M&A, some may just be incremental products or services, and then we'll say these 3 or 4 actually have some viability in terms of being separate C companies. And so we're actually then creating those C companies, placing an operator and a management team, and building those out, at an arm's length. So that's typically, and we're expecting, okay, we may kill some of these. I say kill the good so the great can go through. Some may raise a Series A, and we're saying, okay, if we launch 20 companies with you over 5 years, we'll probably have a couple really, significant companies that can add enterprise value back to the company.
All right, Startup Nation, so we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We got to pay some bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson, and you're listening to The Startup Life. Check it out, Startup Nation. I know many of you are trying to improve your marketing performance, right? You have your business or your e-commerce store, and you're trying to increase that brand awareness. No worries, I got you. You should listen to the brand new Keep Optimizing podcast. That's optimizing with an S and not a Z. It's a marketing podcast that will provide you with not only the latest tips and advice in the game, but also you will hear from experts in their field when it comes to email marketing, SEO, and more. This is a must-listen to podcast for my e-commerce entrepreneurs. It's hosted by Chloe Thomas, who is a 15-year marketing expert, best-selling author, and award-winning podcast host. It's already a top 20 marketing podcast in 7 countries. So clearly, you're going to get amazing value every episode. So as you can see, Startup Nation, you're in good hands with my girl CT. So listen and subscribe to the Keep Optimizing podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you like to get your favorite podcast. You can also get more information at keepoptimizing.com. The link is there in the show notes. Auralex powers this episode of The Startup Life. Startup Nation, as a podcaster, radio host, and business owner, I know a thing or two about the need for your message to come through clearly to your target audience. The last thing you want when trying to close a big deal over the phone or giving a sales presentation in your conference room is to have the person you are talking to be distracted by either the fact that you sound like you're in a warehouse or an outside noise like a fire truck. Trust me, Startup Nation, I know this all too well from experience. And that is why Auralex has your back. Auralex Acoustics creates professionally tested products that you can trust in a commercial space or at home. Better office acoustics improves intelligibility when video conferencing or generic conversation, reduces stress, and helps build a proactive work atmosphere. From a home studio for my content creators to your office space downtown, your gear performs better in an acoustically treated room. Trust me, you are in good hands with Auralex, as they are the #1 brand in acoustics, providing trusted solutions for over 40 years. Also, you can download the Auralex Acoustic Treatment mobile app in the Apple or Google Play Store to give you specifically designed and instantaneous recommendations for various room types. Go to Auralex.com and use the promo code STARTUP in all caps for 10% off your entire order. The link is there in the show notes if you are listening to the replay on the podcast. So if you are ready to stop sounding like you're having a sales meeting in a sports arena, go with Auralex. Professional audio made simple. Tresta powers this episode of The Startup Life. Okay, Startup Nation, I want to talk to you about our sponsor, Tresta. Tresta is an app for iPhone and Android that lets you do business calling and texting from anywhere. I know so many entrepreneurs that are still using their personal phone number for business calls. It can get complicated drawing the line between your personal and professional life. Startup Nation, this is the best business phone app out there. Whether you just need a business phone number or if your team is ready for a complete business phone system, Tresta is totally flexible and can grow with your business. And it's all unlimited calling, texting, and all of the powerful call management features like auto attendance, call recording, user groups, and more for just $15 per user per month. With Tresta, there's no contract, and you don't need any special hardware, just your smartphone you're already using. Tresta is easy to configure, so you can set everything up yourself, all online, avoiding all the hassle and high overhead costs of setting up a traditional business phone system, which is important because as entrepreneurs, we are always trying to cut cost and time. They're offering a 30-day free trial so you can see if Tresta's virtual phone system is right for you. Communicate smarter and more efficiently with Tresta. Start now at Tresta.com/startuplife. That's TRESTA.com/startuplife. The link is there in the show notes if you're listening on the podcast. Tresta, business communication simplified. All right, Startup Nation, welcome back as we continue our conversation with today's guest here on The Startup Life. Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. Once again, Startup Nation, we're talking to Brenda Schmidt, the CEO of Coplex. And if you want to, once again, check out that website, we have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you're listening to the replay on the podcast. And Startup Nation, you may or may not know this, but Coplex has launched more than 300 companies with $4.5 billion in market value and raised $1.5 billion in capital. So when we talk about, entrepreneurship, that's one of the biggest things, Brenda. You know this, raising money, getting that capital, getting that cash flow situation into the business. But I'm curious, and I want to get your commentary on this. When it comes to seeking out an angel investor or a venture capitalist or something like that, what is that 1 to 2 things that they're really looking for? Is it proof of concept? Is it a nice, good pitch deck or idea? Is it the entrepreneur itself? What are those things those investors or those venture capitalists are looking for?
Yeah, the earliest stages of the business, the reason the team makes so much difference in those earliest stages is because that's all they really have to bet on.
Right.
If you're doing, pre-seed, seed, even Series A, the market traction is unproven and the team becomes more significant. Over time, the team becomes less significant because you're already out there in the market. So I'd say it's team. It's definitely total addressable market. You may have a phenomenal idea, but if the venture capital firm doesn't feel that you have the opportunity to be $100 million or greater business, they're not going to be interested because they can't see the financial returns they need to make that investment worthwhile. So right. I think it's team and total addressable market, and then it's product market fit. So yeah, I don't think it's about the deck. I think it's about, you can make it all pretty, but if you don't have the basics around and understanding the market and understanding the unit economics for how your idea can scale at a customer acquisition cost that's reasonable. But in those earliest stages, it's team. And I think that's why entrepreneurs, once they've had a successful exit or a successful business, it's easier for them to raise capital because that proof point is there. I think it's also why men typically get the bulk share of venture capital. It's pattern recognition. Gotcha. Oh, these people look like those people. Those people were successful. So it's sort of as a self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit around just the pattern recognition around teams that have been successful and wanting to invest dollars in teams that look like they could replicate that success.
Gotcha. When you talk about teams, I think that's like a very important, part of building a successful company is the team that's around you. So if what's a prototypical team look like? Is it like the dreamer, the guy who's good with numbers, the person who's great with the product, the person who's great at sales? What does a great team in the entrepreneurial journey look like to you, Brenda?
Yeah, I think it's about matching skill sets. And I think about an entrepreneurial team. There's really 4 areas. There's the idea person, the technology person, the sales and marketing person, and the operations person. And so, a lot of times I'll have people list out, okay, if you had 100 points, how would you rate your skill set across those those 4 points. And if it's 0 for technology, then find someone on your team that is aligned with the mission that fills that gap. So I think it's more of a holistic approach to making sure that you've got those 4 areas covered. That doesn't mean you need a co-founder in those areas. It just means that you need a strong team that, especially as you start scaling early on, that fills those buckets. And those could be fractional, CTO. It could be, an advisor or mentor at early stages. But those are sort of the 4 areas that people have to be pretty self-aware of around their personal skill set and where they can add the most value, and then find people that can do their jobs better than you in those areas where you're not as strong.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And I think a great team, a strong team, especially given everything that's going on with COVID and stuff like that, is super important. So I want to kind of ask and transition to this and ask you this, because we're seeing a lot of, 1 in 5 small businesses are now gone, depending on who you listen to and what estimates or whatever case may be. What in your, in your commentary, what do you think when it comes to a business that survives a catastrophe like COVID-19, what's that differentiator between the ones that make it and the ones that don't when crisis arise?
Yeah, I think it's grit and it's determination. And it's like, we're going to survive at any cost. And so the successful businesses that I saw early on, they were willing to make some hard decisions around cost cutting.
Right.
They were looking for opportunities where they could pivot their business models to meet some of the challenges for their clients that were impacted by COVID. It was getting creative around financing. So I think it's like kind of hunkering down and not hiding, but that grit. I remember I was a CEO, founder and CEO of a previous business during the 2008 crisis. And I remember, getting 8 people around the table and saying, look, we're going to work 80 hours and get paid for 32. So people were taking like a 20% pay cut on a regular 40-hour work week. I said, or someone's going home today. Like, what do you want to do? And so I think that, just continuing to over communicate internally and then finding opportunities to save the business externally, I think, is just critical in times of crisis.
Absolutely. And, you talked about those cost cutting measures, and let's be honest, one of the biggest cost cutting measures that people have been taking, during this time is, human capital. And letting people go, and it's like you don't want to, but there's some business where that's just a reality. So I guess I want to ask you this: when it gets to that point, and you've exhausted everything that you possibly do, and you just gotten to the point where you have to let somebody go because of a crisis. What does that conversation sound like? Kind of walk us through that in your commentary, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely laid people off over my career, and there's different, there's sort of 3 different buckets. There's the performance conversation, and that's frankly the easiest conversation.
Of course.
Sometimes it's just there's the wrong seats on the bus. It's that as the organization evolves and pivots over time, that a certain skill set that somebody had in the organization just isn't needed anymore. But I think in terms of the COVID crisis and the impact that people had in their employees after that, it was more around, I hate to do this. You are super, super valuable. But my responsibility as the CEO is the fiduciary responsibility for everyone's livelihood and keeping this company alive to be able to make the impact that we think it can make. And unfortunately, that means, impacting your job. And so it's a really hard conversation, but it's never personal. And so I always try to almost take this third person approach to some of those decisions around, hey, if somebody else came in here and didn't have any personal relationships, what decisions would they make? Because I think sometimes we actually wait too long to make some critical decisions because those are strong personal relationships. And it is hard to have that sort of emotional firewall of just thinking about things very objectively. But I think that's one of the, the key things that a good CEO needs to do. For sure.
It's definitely heartbreaking from time to time, especially given, everything and going on. But you're absolutely right, though. You say, like, as the CEO, you have a fiduciary responsibility to make those calls. And so, while it's hard, you just got to do it. There's no way around it. So I appreciate your commentary and your advice and insight on that for sure. Cause I know a lot of people are kind of, they're at that point and it's really hard. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I mean, especially when you're an entrepreneur and you built the company, you've probably hired the people on the team, and you've all worked really hard together and celebrated together and grieved together. Those are very strong personal bonds, and it is hard to make those decisions after that. But it's not a family, it's not.
Right. No, it's true.
But it is hard sometimes to separate out those relationships.
For sure. I wanted to ask you this because, and maybe you've experienced this and seen it from, from the sidelines or something. I'm not sure. But, I was looking at an article today and talking about things to consider when passing on like a family-owned business to the next generation. Statistics often show us that, with every generation that gets passed down, the likelihood of success, kind of goes down drastically. So I'm curious about, your commentary on that. Like, what is some of that advice, or anything that you've seen in your entrepreneurial career that can kind of help with that, things to consider and stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't have really direct experience,
right.
But I think, part of it is, don't make the assumption that one of your kids necessarily wants to run the business.
Fair
so that's
enough.
Probably set that expectation. But I do think that this whole conversation around succession planning, regardless of where you are in the life cycle of that business, it's always important to think about whether that is a tragedy that may happen at the C-suite, or whether that's hey, I want to retire in 10 years, or whether that's hey, my kid is at a certain point in their life and I'd like to mentor them. But I do think that while I don't have any direct experience, I've been in some CEO peer groups where that has been more of a topic of conversation, where I think it kind of falls into that broader bucket around succession planning, and just make sure there's a plan there, really understanding what's going to happen to that business over time and what should happen.
Gotcha. But I do imagine with some of your clients there at Coplex that you have the conversation about maybe, exiting and stuff like that with founders, correct?
Yeah, exiting, and honestly, part of it is the kind of a hard conversation. Or do you think you're the right CEO?
Fair enough.
Because a lot of folks, you talked about a technology founder or a research founder, and they may have a great idea or great technology, and they are not going to be the best CEO for that business. And so it goes back to that sort of being, intellectually, or honest with yourself around what your real skill set is. So, and I think the founders that may start a business and be successful in those super early stages also have to be aware of, at what stage are they not the best CEO for that business? And so I do think that, to your point, as those businesses evolve, for so many entrepreneurs, it's very hard to differentiate their own persona or their identity from the identity of the business. And that's, I think, what makes that separation really hard, is you're not the business. The business is a separate entity. And so I think as those, whether it's contemplating a business failure or a business sale or a CEO transition, I think it's really important to make sure that you are emotionally separated from that business so that you can make those decisions a little bit more, objectively.
For sure. One more COVID question, and I promise we'll transition to something else, because I wanted to ask you something. On July 12th, you retweeted something about Dr. Fauci, saying, it's basically like a gift that says, listen to Fauci and stuff like that. And with your background in microbiology and immunology, kind of give your commentary on what you're seeing right now as we kind of deal with this pandemic in your mind.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in following the science.
Right.
And I think that it's been really difficult for, the general American public to potentially differentiate fact from fiction as it comes to the science, because they're getting a lot of different information from different sources.
Right.
And I think that's been really hard. But I know here, in March, I was in the president role, and we set strict criteria for when we would work from home. So that's what I was trying to do, is like, okay, how are we going to react as an organization? And so we set the criteria that if the state declared an emergency or the public universities closed, we would work from home. And then we created a set of policies associated with that. And that was back in probably early, might be February.
Right.
And then when that happened, we're like, okay, we're implementing the plan. And so, we're still not back to work. But I do think, following the guidelines around, there's a couple of us here and we're masked and, doused in hand sanitizer. But
Right.
I do think that depending on your risk level, the science is dictating, I think, our activity. And I think part of it, though, is we're just all tired of it.
Right.
And I think that's where people who don't feel maybe that they're as at risk as others are loosening their compliance with those scientific guidelines just because of, fatigue. We kind of want our own lives back.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm sorry, were you about to say something else? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, go ahead.
No, I definitely understand that. I think we are kind of, like a little, tired of this stupid COVID. This year has been definitely one for the history books for sure.
Yeah, we have hornets, whatever, we've got just the whole year, is just almost one big meme of
Right.
all the things that have just happened this year. And so I think we're all just anxious for 2021 and the promise that things can get a little bit back to normal.
For sure. I was telling my wife the other day, I was okay, but when I saw fire tornadoes, I was done. I was done with 2020.
And I think for just us personally, you just sort of slowly expand your bubble,
right.
In terms of just having some kind of social contact that is meaningful. And then what's nice about us here now in Arizona is we're just starting to get to the nice part of the year where we can spend more time outside. For us over the
Right.
summer was what was difficult because that's the time when we're all hunkered down inside in air conditioning. So
Right.
I'm looking forward to enjoying being outside more too.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of that for sure. Once again, Startup Nation, we're actually wrapping up with Brenda Schmidt, the CEO of Coplex. And once again, if you want to check out the website and the things that they're doing there, go to coplex.com. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access. If you're listening to the replay on the podcast. And speaking of Arizona, we talked about earlier at the top of the show that you sit on the board of Startup AZ Foundation. Kind of talk about the startup culture and the entrepreneurial culture there in Phoenix and greater Arizona.
Yeah, I feel like we have all of the ingredients in Arizona, the university, there's capital, there's these really strong support from the state and the economic development community. And it just needs to get pulled together. And I think that's starting to happen because we should be, an Austin or a Nashville or, we see Salt Lake kind of, emerging as an
Absolutely.
innovation hub. And so, I just feel like, at this stage in my career, really trying to give back and in supporting that as much as I can as being part of organizations like, the Startup AZ Foundation, and I'm the board on the Arizona Bioindustry Foundation that are really looking for how we can coordinate and support young entrepreneurs and give them some capital and honestly mentorship and support. So Startup AZ Foundation takes a group of young entrepreneurs called a collective, and they spend 12 months together and really hold each other accountable, share, personal and business, triumphs and tribulations. But I think, creating that infrastructure, that what we're hoping is that we have enough successful startups and exits in Phoenix and in Arizona in general that it just can have that generosity flywheel, right? We exit, we give back, we start investing in new entrepreneurs, and then all of a sudden there becomes this high growth tech innovation ecosystem that's fueled by successful entrepreneurs and are starting to create an environment where we have, some of the best entrepreneurs and technology in the world that we can then, put into, new operators and new companies. So I just enjoy being part of that ecosystem as we're growing that here in Arizona.
Got you. Thank you for sharing it. Let me ask a follow up because, you talked about Austin, you talk about the growing, space there in Salt Lake City, and I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. So I'm very familiar with what's going on in Nashville. What do you think they're doing right when it comes to the startup culture there in those places or anywhere else for that matter?
Yeah, I think part of the limitation that we've had here in Arizona is when people invest, they invest in real estate. They don't invest in young entrepreneurs. It's just not, we don't have that culture. And so I think part of it has been able just really trying to socialize the opportunity for not only liquidity but enterprise value by investing in some of these young startups. So I do think Nashville has a tremendous mentor, leader, history of supporting that community, which I think we're all trying to follow on and replicate.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you this. If you could talk to any person from history, living or not, and just kind of pick their brain for like an hour, who would that be and why? And what would you ask them?
Oh, wow. That's an unexpected question. Who I wish I would have talked to is like Nelson Mandela. Okay. I just felt like, I like to talk with people who are genuinely and authentically trying to make an impact, right. And not necessarily in business, but I feel like one of the opportunities and frankly obligations that entrepreneurs and large businesses have is trying to make a social impact on individuals, families, and communities. And I think that that's something that I just am really passionate about and would love to have had the opportunity to sit down and talk about that with him.
For sure. You was talking about grit earlier, and if there's ever somebody who knows something about grit, it's Nelson Mandela, for sure. Yeah. But I want to ask a follow-up from that because, we're seeing like this new generation of entrepreneurs, like the Gen Z and the younger millennials, kind of have this altruistic capitalism approach where they have like this social aspect to their companies. Kind of talk about that a little bit. I imagine that's something that you're definitely glad you're seeing.
Absolutely. I mean, I think very much it's around doing well by doing good and always having that social impact. And I also think it plays into the grit. If you're just out there as an entrepreneur because you want to make a bunch of money, is that really what's inspiring you to get up in the morning as opposed to a mission that says, I'm getting up today and I'm going to, it's hard to be an entrepreneur, but when you get up and you're like, it's really hard, that the opportunity to make a meaningful impact in people's lives, especially in the healthcare ecosystem where I've spent my career, is actually what drives you. The money tends to be, a secondary opportunity, but I think it's because people realize that startups and early stage businesses, you can see the direct impact from your efforts every day, right. And you can actually make a much better impact, I think, than some large corporations who are really aligned around just maintaining the status quo and meeting their quarterly financial targets. And so I'm thrilled to see that lens on social impact and honestly the emergence of more and more social impact investors that are investing in young entrepreneurs specifically because their idea has an impact, whether that's the climate. Certainly there's a lot of attention now on edtech and education and
Absolutely.
Healthcare and all of the employment and work looks different now, and there's certainly an opportunity for impact there as well.
Absolutely. It's funny you mentioned EdTech. That's something the parent company for the show we're working on now. We actually had applied for an EdTech grant with the Department of Education, but due to this was around March, so due to COVID, that kind of went away and stuff like that. But no, I definitely understand what you're talking about there because we're seeing it all over the place where and it seems like the consumers are kind of driving it where, it's like people want to see that not only are you selling me a great product, but like we want to know what you're doing for planet Earth, whether it be through, climate change, whether it be through social justice or wherever the case may be. So it's quite interesting to see.
Yeah, I totally agree. I always think, Tom's wouldn't be a company, Tom's Shoes, if they hadn't had the impact and the mission. They said, if you buy a pair of shoes, I'm going to give someone a pair of shoes. They're not particularly special shoes, right. At least they weren't when they came out. So I definitely think all things being equal, a company that has a product with a social mission versus one that doesn't, the one with the social mission is going to have greater consumer engagement.
It definitely seems that way. Definitely seems that way. Thank you for sharing that. And before I ask the last question, Brenda, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. You gave amazing insight to your path of entrepreneurship and what you do. And once again, Startup Nation, that website is Coplex, COPLEX.com. We have a link there in the show notes for easy access if you're listening to the replay on the podcast. But now, Brenda, I'm actually going to turn the microphone over to you because given everything that's going on, we could definitely use some words of encouragement. If you would, ma'am, just kind of share some words of encouragement to take us out for today, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I would just say for any of you out there who are entrepreneurs, congratulations and keep on going. And for those of you who are considering entrepreneurship, it's probably one of the most rewarding things that you'll do in your life. And just, visualize the world the business you want to create and just go out there and make it happen.
All right. Awesome stuff. And that's going to wrap up this session of the Startup Life. We want to once again thank Brenda Schmidt for coming on. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much, Dominic.
No worries. And as always, Startup Nation, if you have an idea, be about that life, the Startup Life. If you want to let us know what you think about our show, have an idea for a show topic, or would like to advertise on our show, send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a great way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is there in the show notes. Subscribe to the show as it can be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or even on your Facebook timeline or any other platform you like to get your podcast. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. You can also listen to the show on the Startup Life Podcast new website. There you will find the all-new Startup blog where I write on many topics that are interesting and helpful to you on your path to entrepreneurship. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life, the Startup Life.